appreciate that.
Good try, man. 7:15.
Happy that you can do it. Hey, does anybody know where this exists?
Welcome to the Willows City Council special meeting of April 18, 2023. Calling the meeting to order, please stand for the pledge of allegiance. John, would you be so kind to lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hopkins?
Here.
Councilmember Williams?
Here.
Councilmember Hanson?
Here.
Vice Mayor Bodden?
Here.
Mayor Thomas?
Here. Now, before we get to changes to the agenda, I'd like to introduce Carolyn Walker, our new city attorney.
Thank you. Hello.
She was unable to be here at the last meeting. She sent her colleague Sean, and she is now officially the city attorney, and she's on staff and on site. So, well, she lives in Red Bluff, so it's close. Familiar with cities of our size. Lives in a city that's not too much bigger than Willows, so we're pleased to have you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Happy to be here.
Changes to the agenda, I don't think we have any.
There are none.
So all matters in this section of the agenda is discussed will be acted upon individually. Individuals wishing to address the city council concerning any of these items are invited to make oral comments up to 3 minutes at this time. Please address your comments to the mayor or the council members and not to the staff or the audience. When the mayor calls for a public comment, please raise your hand and acknowledge. While not required, the city requests that you please state your name and clearly for the audio recording. By state law, the council is not permitted to undertake any action or discussion on any item not appearing on the posted agenda. If you have documentation that you would like to distribute to the city council, please deliver it to the city clerk at the city hall. We have basically the one item on the public agenda is the Cal Water rate structure. Patrick? Nope.
If I
Yes.
could just briefly, I just wanted to mention that while the agenda says regular session, discussion, and action, there is no action this evening. This is a study session. Thank you.
And actually, I need to call for public comment before I got too far ahead of my shoes. So, anybody wishing to address the city council at this time? Rush? Okay, now we'll turn it over to Patrick.
We have a two-part presentation this evening. The first part's going to be delivered by Cal Water, and then I'll do the second part. Cal Water's going to talk about what it takes to run a water department, and then I'm going to talk about what we have here and our enterprise fund. So I'll turn it over to Tavis.
Well, good evening, everyone.
We have a microphone that we're going to let you use, so
Okay.
guys in the recorder. If you'd introduce your team, that would be awesome.
I will. That is part of what I'm going to do. So good evening. My name is Tavis Bynum. I am the Willows District Manager for Cal Water. And I will get to my team, but just wanted to thank you guys for the opportunity to come and share what we do and hopefully be able to answer your questions tonight. So the team that is with me, Shannon McGovern is our Community Affairs, Government Community Affairs Specialist. She'll be helping me present tonight. We also have Megan Tenuta, who is our Northern Water Quality Manager. And then we also have Kevin McCusker, who is also a Government and Community Relations team member. Okay.
Thank you.
So what we're hoping to share a little bit tonight is give you some insight on who we are as Cal Water, and then of course what we do on a day-to-day basis. We're going to get into some of the rates, especially those related to the Chrome 6 stuff, and some things like that, and give you a breakdown of costs and how much it costs us basically to operate and maintain those plants, as well as talk about the operation overall of what we do. Not a lot of costs there, but more just what we do on a day-to-day basis and what we do for the city of Willows. We'll also talk about our community involvement a little bit and just basically share who we are a little bit. So, with that, get to it. So, Cal Water, a little bit of history. We were formed in 1926, so we've been around 95 years now. So we have almost 100 years of water utility experience. We serve several areas throughout California. We have 23 districts. and through those districts, the northernmost district being Chico, southernmost being...
Travis, just one moment, please. Folks, can you see the monitor? We have the handouts, but I don't know, is it turned too much that you can't see it? Okay, all right, sorry about that, Travis. We've got the handout, we can follow along, but no problem. Sure. Thank you.
Yep, so the southernmost being Rancho Dominguez. So we serve over 2 million Californians through almost 500,000 service connections here in California. We serve over 80 billion gallons of water annually, and through to make sure that water meets all federal and state standards, we perform over 400,000 water quality tests per year. So we're very good at what we do. Just wanted to recognize a couple things we've been recognized for in the last few years. For 6 years, we were named one of the top great places to work. One that I'm proud of was we were included in Newsweek's article on America's most responsible companies. And as you can see, we were ranked 180 out of 500, and we were ranked 19 from our water utility peers out of that group. So we've been a part of the Willows community since 1927. So we again started the company in 1926, so shortly after we purchased the system in Chico, we purchased the system here in Willows, I believe from PG&E at the time. We currently operate with 4 employees that are dedicated to the Willows district, including myself and 3 field employees. That being said, I'll get into a little bit more on the extra support that we have in actually maintaining this system. But through those 4 employees, we have 10 professional certifications. So we have T2 and D2s, treatment certifications and distribution certifications that are given to the state to run water systems. We also have OSHA 30 training and certs, and then we also have a wastewater cert as well as a backflow cert. Okay. So we have 62 years of combined experience between our folks. Here in Willows, we also house a couple of what we call our SCADA technicians, which help us with our software and our security, and they're assigned to the North State, but they are housed here in Willows. So one of the strongest assets that we have at Cal Water is the support from our corporate office, which we call our CSS. Through that, we're supplied with specialists for engineering, water quality, extra operational assistance. Say we face an emergency, a main break, a huge fire, or something that requires more personnel. We can have personnel here within hours from inside our company that is trained and knows what to do and how to operate our system and come in and assist us. Another large part is environmental. We have our own environmental, our own accounting, our own IT security. We have our own SCADA technicians, which SCADA is what we use to actually control our system, so we can actually have remote access to a lot of our sites. We can shut things off, turn things on, monitor the system, see the levels of our tanks, see the pressures in our systems, know where we stand, know what our chlorine residuals are, all kinds of different aspects in our system. It allows us to have a lot of control. We also have our own safety department, so on top of all those professional certifications, there's also a lot of safety training that is required for all those field employees. So we do all of our own internal training, whether that is bringing in an outside expert to train on it or using our in-house safety team, and that's everything from Department of Transportation with hazardous material all the way to trench safety to heat and illness prevention and a lot of other things that come with field activities like that. Another thing that we are very good at is emergency preparedness and response. We've been practicing this and doing this for several years now. We host community events. Yearly, we train our employees all the way down to the boots on the ground field employees on emergency response and how to our system on how to respond and how they fit into that system. We hold community events within our communities that we serve, where we invite other agencies and partners in the community to come and train with us, see how we operate. And a big part of that is opening up that line of communication, where if we do have emergencies, that's a huge part of how to respond in any community, is that open line of communication and knowing who to call and who to talk to. So we actually do have an event coming up later this year in July here in Willows. So we'll be working towards inviting those folks and making sure all the agencies here in town can attend. So, in Willows, we serve just over 6,200 folks. We have about 2,400 service connections. We have 37 miles of main, and one thing I want to bring up with that, here in Willows, we did have 23 main leaks last year, which actually is a pretty significant number for a system our size, which starts to tell us that we have an old aging system here. 1927, we purchased it. I'm not sure how old it was prior to that, but some of those downtown areas and some of those older parts of town are getting up there. So for us, we have an outside agency, but an outside part of our company that comes in to actually run our main replacement program. So they'll come in and we target certain mains, obviously leaks, age, whether it's near hospitals and schools, there's a whole list of criteria. And that, of course, goes into part of our rate case requesting those to be replaced. A large part of that also is fire protection. Those older mains, you open up a hydrant, you want them to flow and not come apart on you as you're starting to move a lot of water through the system. So we operate 7 wells. 4 of those really are active wells where we have the Chrome 6 treatment plants installed. The other 3 are standby wells that would only be used if for some reason we lost the treatment plants or we had a large fire and just needed to kick them on in order to supply our firefighters with some water. We would have to notify the state if we were to do that, but there's some requirements that we jump through, but they are available. Here in Willows, we also have 850,000 gallons of storage. You guys obviously know where the elevated tank is, over there by the railroad tracks in the PG&E building. And then we also have the large tank over there behind Walmart, which also helps us supply for and protect against large fires and gives us our fire protection. Shannon. So Shannon's going to run you through the next couple slides, talk a little bit about the community.
Who's that handsome man in the middle there?
That would be our distinguished mayor.
Yeah, we look a little old there.
I like the rabbit.
So you can, I'll give you 3 guesses. Who is the rock star in the rabbit
Well, our
costume?
previous speaker, I would be.
That would be
yeah.
Tavis Bynum.
Doesn't look
Volunteered graciously to serve as the Easter Bunny this year. Good evening, Council, Mr. Mayor. My name is Shannon McGovern, Regional Community Affairs for Cal Water, serving Oroville. I want to talk just a little bit about our involvement and our commitment to the community, and then I'll go into an overview of how we're structured and how our rates are determined by the state. So in the community, we have a charitable giving budget that we work with various nonprofits and different organizations in the community. We're very committed to ensuring that we do everything that we can to improve the quality of life for our customers, and that goes above and beyond just ensuring a safe, reliable supply of drinking water. We believe that a safe and healthy community is better for all of us, and so we make financial contributions to different organizations. We participate in service groups and other nonprofit activities, and we're proud of our involvement in the community. Now, so in terms of how our rates are structured, I'm going to give you a basic overview, and then there'll be an opportunity for us to go into greater detail after that. So we receive our governance from the California Public Utilities Commission. They provide our oversight, and every 3 years, we're required to submit an infrastructure improvement plan. And what that is Tavis and his team, with support from our offices and our subject matter experts, they compile a report and a recommendation to the CPUC for what they anticipate the needs being in Willows for the coming 3 years. So that includes everything from main replacement, security upgrades, computer software, employee headcount, vehicles, everything with a dollar amount tied to it needs to be included within that plan. And it is scrutinized with a fine-tooth comb by a committee within the CPUC called the Office of Ratepayer Advocates. Oh, they changed the name.
It's just called Public Advocates.
Public Advocate's Office, sorry, they change their name about every 2 years, so. And they look at everything that we are proposing through only one lens, and that is that of the ratepayer. So then what happens is we go through a period of negotiation with them to determine what is, what projects and infrastructure needs are, the greatest, because at the end of the day, we're not haggling and we're not arguing with each other. We're trying to strike a balance between the needs of infrastructure and providing safe, reliable water and affordability for our customers. So it's achieving that end that we all work towards, and that's a pretty long process. It takes about 18 months. Afterwards, that is when you see bill effects show up on customers' bills, and they are based incrementally over the next 3 years. So every 3 years we go through that process. Yeah, like I said, all of our costs are determined by, are vetted, and we go into great detail to ensure that they have all the information that they need. The CPUC does come, they do inspect the work that they have previously approved. So, we are held accountable for everything that we ask for and that we receive, because at the end of the day, those are ratepayer funds. So the CPUC determines what we can charge, what we can build, when we can build it, and what we can earn. So an important distinction is that there is no markup on the cost of delivering water. Every cent that we spend to ensure that water is safe, quality, and reliable is exactly what we charge the customer. The way we earn is on investment, on infrastructure investment. So similar to the city floating a bond, if they needed to do an infrastructure project, that's how we receive a return on investment, is from our investors. So that's an important distinction to make. And I will let Tavis go on with the rest of the presentation. We'll talk a lot more about water quality, and we can come back to rates if any of you have specific questions after that. Oh, I have 2 more? Yeah. What else am I talking about?
I'll get you in a minute.
Okay.
Okay, so the most important thing on what we do, and our biggest mission, is to protect the health and safety of our customers. So one thing, in order to do that in our water system here in Willows, we complete on average over 3,500 water tests on about 680 water samples. So that's an annual collection. So if you break that down, we take about 56 samples a month, basically, to make sure our water meets all federal and state standards. We utilize, so in order to do that, we have our own lab in our corporate office, and we have our own internal delivery system that we use. We also do use certified local labs as well, although some of those are starting to close down and consolidate a little bit, so that's becoming a little tougher. But we still do use them, and especially when it comes to like emergency main repairs and leaks where we have to take a sample after we make the repair. Those typically go to our local contract labs. Okay, so to the Chrome 6. So as we stated before, we have 4 sites here in the system that have Chrome 6 treatment plants installed. Before I get into the operation, just one of the main things that is still impacting Willows rates was the building and implementation of those plants. So back in 2014, we began the initial construction. They were eventually completed right at the beginning of 2017 in that time frame. So the plants altogether totaled about $10 million. Cal Water was able to apply and get a grant for $5 million to assist with that installation and to help relieve rates to the folks here in Willows. So that left about $5 million sitting in our rate case. If you break it down, that breaks down to about just under $2.5 million per plant. They're pretty complicated little treatment plants. And as we'll go through here, so these are hexavalent chrome treatment plants. They're strong base ion exchange. they're still considered the best treatment process currently. There are other treatments being looked at, but as far as the effectiveness of those treatments, they're still being kind of judged and weighed. The other part of our treatment, of course, is chlorine disinfection. That's our main disinfectant. We get it from Spray Chem here, a local company, and they help deliver it to our station so we can disinfect the system. So when the MCL first came out, the draft MCL from the state, it was set at 10 parts per billion. Typically, Willows raw water sits at about 20 parts per billion, so we're about double the MCL, which is minimum contaminant level. I don't know if I said that. But in 2014, we immediately began installing the plants for treatment. There was a grace period to meet the treatment requirements at the time, so we immediately began installing those plants. In 2017, due to a procedural change, it was put on hold as far as the MCL fully being introduced by the state. Cal Water kept up treatment, however, we had the plants functioning by then. Health and safety is the top priority of our customers, so we kept operating those plants to make sure we were meeting that potential MCL and make sure that we were supplying safe, healthy water to Willows customers. And the date didn't get changed on here. That's actually, it should be 2022. The new MCL was to be published in 2022. It got held up by the courts, once again, not for health reasons, but more for, I think, economic reasons, because they realized the economic impact on us is going to be quite large, especially in small communities. So it is still anticipated, though, that the MCL will be set at 10 parts per billion. So we are currently meeting that, and we are currently supplying safe, healthy water to Willows. So here's an overall breakdown of the operational cost of these plants. So you can see our labor there, the contract treatment reporting service. These were the folks and the company that originally came in to help us set up these plants. There's some proprietary information there that we are still working through, trying to get trained on, so we have them still working under a contract with us to help maintain and operate those plants. The cost you see there is for two separate entities, one for a gentleman that comes in and does our maintenance, does some checks, does some system adjustments for us depending on what we're seeing with the plants. The other one is connected to our reporting that we submit to EDW and the software that it takes to run these plants. You can see there's also waste hauls involved. Over the years that we've been running them, we have gotten pretty efficient at combining those waste hauls and spacing them out as long as we can to try to cut costs on those waste hauls. But as you can see, they're still quite costly in a year. There's a salt cost with it, and you can see that the total cost to run 4 of these plants for Willows is just over $220,000 a year. So here's a general breakdown of Willows bills today and where the percentage of those charges are going. So we can kind of go through it real quick. Again, the capital improvements, still paying for the installation of those plants. Also, it has to do with our main replacement and other things that we are requesting to continue to upgrade the Willows aging infrastructure. Another part of it is, the second largest part is our water professionals, which we put a lot of time and money into our people. They are highly trained, they are highly capable, and that's very important in our business and in our eyes that they know what they're doing every day and we can continue to supply safe water to everyone. The other part of that, operations and maintenance, so that would be the leaks I spoke of earlier, the main leaks, the service leaks, hydrant issues, also issues at our plants where we have to replace some of the parts and some different things like that. Support services, that's the part I spoke of earlier with our corporate office, which is a huge part of what we do. We wouldn't be as good as we are without that support and those experts when we need them to come up and help us in any situation. They're here within hours and they're giving us their expert opinion on what the next steps are and the best way to approach issues or anything that we come across that we feel we can't handle locally. And then the water production would just basically be our power and chemical charges to run the stations. And then we have, of course, some money in there for conservation. It's a vital resource, so we're always going to put some money towards that to make sure we're conserving as much as possible. I know the council had asked for this specifically, so we wanted to show you a comparison between the Willows and Chico, and specifically Hamilton City. I know that was mentioned. And then we also put in Oroville as another comparison. And as you can see, I mean, it's really kind of simple when you talk about it. We have the large cost for treatment here with the Chrome 6 plants. Fortunately, we're the only local city that is dealing with that at the time. So you can see there that water treatment is 38% of Willow's costs since 2011. That's about the time when we started doing the studies and the prepping to install the plants and everything that led up to Chrome 6. So we can get into a little bit more of that if you have questions after. But as you can see, Willows has 8% of the customer base that Chico does. So the Chico just has a much larger rate base to spread it out over. And Hamilton City is tied in with Chico. That's one thing we are always looking at as a company here, is trying to consolidate smaller communities into larger communities. It's the small communities that are greatly impacted by things like Chrome 6 and the other substances and things that will continue to come out from the state that we have to treat for. So hopefully at some point that may be an option for folks here in Willows. And then Shannon's going to wrap us up with the last couple of slides.
So these are just some of the things that we do to help support our customers. You know, like I said, we do everything that we can to keep costs in check and to keep them as low as we can while still providing safe, reliable water. So as you can see here, but for those in the audience that may not be able to see it, we were one of the first water utilities in the state to have a customer assistance program, and that is a pretty robust program that we maintain support for. We have a supplemental rate fund that assists folks who are struggling with their bills. We also work in conjunction with states and local governments, mostly counties, to help distribute and to help communicate with customers that may qualify for access to state and federal allocated funds. I know that there's funding available most recently for low-income water assistance programs. So we're doing everything we can to reach out to our customers to ensure that they're taking advantage of some of those programs. We have penalty-free payment plans, hardship grants. We were one of the first water suppliers to support the Safe Affordable Drinking Water Act because we do believe that safe, clean, reliable water is important for everybody in every community. And so we were proponents of that. During the pandemic, we were the first large water utility to suspend water shutoffs for non-payment even before the governor's executive order. And we maintained that for at least 2 years. And we work with our customers to every extent possible to ensure that they have consistent, steady supply of water, regardless of any hardship that they may be going through. We have, like I said, payment plans, and we'll work with them to ensure that they stay in water. And then we do other things internally to ensure that we're doing the best thing for our communities as a corporate citizen, and that involves, investing in our people, purchasing from, diverse suppliers. We make sure that we develop sustainable supplies, and we do all of that to meet the needs of our communities. So I think that we will stop there, and I will turn this back over to Pat. And then we are here at your disposal to answer any questions that you have after we wrap up. And we thank you very much for your time and the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Water just spoke about what it takes to run an operation and how they actually operate. And what I'm going to talk about tonight is how our system operates and why it may not be the most effective thing for our community to have. So I wanted to start off by talking about what is an enterprise fund. And I know that we heard about this just last week. But an enterprise fund is a self-sustaining fund that's created to provide a good or service to members of the public, and it's to be paid for, it's meant to be paid for by the members of the public, by the users of that facility. So in this case, water. So that would cover all the costs of delivery, the cost of testing, the cost of repairs, maintenance, and for this, the initial construction, those could be done initially by bonds or loans or come out of the general fund, that they would be paid back by the users. And then, as Shannon had mentioned, it would require a 218 study to change those rates or to even determine them in the first place. Our system that we have down there now, we have 2 wells, and they were both built in 1982. The first one is capable of pumping 300 gallons per minute, and it was built by the Glen Fertilizer Company, which is now Wilbur Ellis. The second one was built in 1982 in June. Oh, thank you. Oh, did I hit the buttons on accident? No. All right, thanks, Jeff. Cat's buttons. Okay, so built in 1982, and it's capable of pumping 1,200 gallons per minute. The second well was produced for fire suppression. So the chronology of the system is in 1982, the wells were installed by Glen Fertilizer. In 1995, the plans were generated by the city to take over the system. In 96, Swift Transportation was constructed. In 2000, a subdivision map was approved for the South Willows Industrial Park. In 2003, the Chevron station was constructed. In 2008, the city contracted with a consultant to provide a feasibility study to install a water line from the wells to the Cal Water system. In 2014, conversations began with Cal Water to potentially take over the wells. 2016, Cal Water submitted an offer for the takeover of the wells. In 2018, Coastline Engineering provided a map to divide the city-owned property that's down there by the wells to carve out a 1.7 acre parcel that would support Cal Water's takeover of the wells so that they could build a water tank to operate a system. In 2021, Assemblymember Gallagher wrote and pushed through a bill that is AB 850 that was specifically meant for us, the city of Alani and the city of Montebello, 3 cities that had small wells that were not delivering to very many customers, and they were all 3 not cost effective for the city to own and operate. So this was to be able to get rid of a well, for us to get rid of a well, it would actually require us to go to a vote. So it's an election, which is costly to put on the ballot, it's costly to run. This bill here allows us to dispose of this well, to commute it over to Cal Water for not going through that process. And that expires in January of 2024. It was already extended once, so it was originally to those done in 2021. It was meant to expire in 2023, but it was extended last year through another bill that Assemblymember Gallagher wrote, and that allowed it to be extended for 1 additional year. Okay, so, whoops, I'm getting behind again. All right, so if we were to operate, or the requirements to operate a system means staff. You have to have people to do it. And the staff has to be certified. And this number that I put down here, $2,300 per person, that was a course that I found just trying to figure out what it might cost. So it's $2,300 per person. What I found out is that it's a laborious training, and it requires a state certification and a state exam that is rigorous, and people often don't pass it the first time. That you must pass that test to be able to be certified to be an operator. And then there's ongoing recertifications that are required and training hours that have to be done each year. Regular testing and monitoring is required. Have to test it. Our crew currently goes out every day and they test the water level in the tank, they test the pressure in the tank, they confirm the length and the time that the pumps were running since the day before. Water samples are taken weekly, monthly, quarterly, and then an annual report is required to a consumer confidence report to be delivered to all of the customers of the system. Additional considerations are the cost it would take for staff time to be able to operate a water enterprise fund. We actually don't know this full cost as it is right now. It would take our people, we would need to have 2 people that would be certified. So we need redundancy to be able to make sure that we have someone always covering this who's here. And we don't know the cost of the long-term infrastructure maintenance and repairs because the water lines will go bad at some point, the pumps will go bad, the valves will go bad, problems with the tank, leaks and that kind of thing. And all those things need to be taken care of over time. And as the customer base expands, the staffing levels may need to expand as well, and the infrastructure costs will also increase. Right, the future potential liabilities are, and Tavis already really covered this in quite detail. We have to treat for contaminants like the chromium-6, the PFASs, microplastics, which are difficult to quantify. And there's new and pending legislation that's coming up and that will continue to come up. And so it'll just require us to do more and more testing, filtering, and certification of our water. The current operational costs. So this number that you're looking at right here is the first number is the revenues. This is for last fiscal year. The revenues were, we took in $6,000 from the 3 customers that used these wells, and we expended $19,174. Over the past 20 years, it's been fluctuating. Some years we spend more, some years we were less, but it's cost us $65,000 to operate this over the last 20 years. It's cost us, let me say that again, it cost us $65,000 to support the 3 customers that are on these wells over the past 65 years. We're not taking anywhere near that much. I mean, that's what it's costing us to allow them to be on our system. But not included in the previous slide is the current operational costs. So this is staff cost allocation. So we have actually not been counting what the staff costs. You know, Tisa goes every day, she checks the water levels, and then she has to check the pumps. She has to go and get the water tested. That goes to Chico. Someone has to drive out there to do that. Sometimes Inframark does it when they're making it run, but today she had to run over there herself to do it. We have to resolve the operating deficit, so that's this cost that it is to us for those 3 customers to be on the system, which would require a 218 study. And then with only 3 customers on there, it takes a 2/3 vote. So 2 of those customers could say no, and the increase fails. Okay, so the associated operating costs that we know of, it would take, so for us to actually turn this into a water company, if we were going to run this water company, we would have to put in tanks, and a tank of about 500,000 gallons would be about $1 million. And then the filtration system, also about $1 million to set up. Other associated operating costs, that these are now unknown. We don't even know exactly what these would be, but it would be increased staff wages, because what happens is, what we have in the past lost two of our public works employees because they got certified and they found out they could make more money someplace else with their certification, and they left us. So we would maybe want to do a wage study to make sure that the people that are certified are getting paid commensurate to what the what they could get elsewhere so that we can have employee retention. There's the certifications and recertifications, pump failures, replacement and repairs, filtration equipment replacement and repairs, responses during power outages, ongoing maintenance and upgrades, and then, of course, unfunded state and federal mandates that we cannot guess might be coming our way at some point. All right, so benefits to connecting to Cal Water, or connecting to the Cal Water system would be, we no longer have those ongoing costs of risk and liability to operate a water department. And then it would cost us $550,000, what council has budgeted already through the ARPA funds. And then it takes away from us, Cal Water is better equipped to operate this than we are. Cal Water, over the economy of scale of all of their operations and the expertise they have people that are already performing these functions that can come and perform the functions for us. So where we would have quite a bit of costs to make this happen for us, they would be able to absorb this into what they're working on. They will have some costs. They have to build a tank, they have to do the filtration system, but their costs are different than ours. They have the expertise for this. The disadvantages for us doing this are minimal when you consider the advantages that we have from eliminating the risks that we have. So I have a fun thing for you now. So, wait a second.
Second screen.
F8, thank you. John, my IT guys, Willows City engineer. Some of you may have seen this before. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation, and I'll close this out by just, it seems that Assemblymember Gallagher really put a lot of effort into this specifically for us. There's also Elani and Montebello, but it does expire on January 1st of 2024, so if we're going to take advantage of giving this over to Cal Water and letting them operate a water company by someone who knows how to operate a water company, this is our chance to do this without having to go through an election or taking this for a vote. And we'll open this up to any questions.
It's working out.
Well, I have a question for Cal Water. How long will it take to amortize that $5 million that you invested to pay for those wells that you had to put in?
Yeah, I don't have the amortization schedule with me. That's not something I had prepped, but those things usually take whatever the, I'm sorry, Kevin McCusker, Cal Water, I'm the Community Affairs Manager for the record. The amortization schedule for pieces of infrastructure can be,
Still working.
Goes to here.
yeah, they're specific to the infrastructure itself. So the amortization on, say, a treatment facility, which I don't know off the top of my head, can be and is different than the amortization on a new well or a tank. So it all has to be fairly highly specific, and we maintain those schedules with the approval of the PUC. So that's how it gets charged out. It's about a $10 million investment, but 5 of that was grant funded.
My curiosity was if we're paying 67 and the rest of the folks are paying 35, and we have an amortization to pay for that $5 million, when does that sunset where we might see a rate reduction because we've covered that cost? Is that a possibility?
It is a possibility, but that would assume that, and this is a difficult thing in the rate making process, but costs are dropping off, but new costs come on during that ongoing cycle. So you could drop off one, but at that same time, potentially, let's say, hypothetically, I'm not saying that this is the number, but let's say that the number was 25 years. If the number was 25 years, during that course of 25 years, there could be other new infrastructure pieces added to the bill. So although that cost drops off, there could be other things that affect the actual bill in the rate making process. But and I'm not saying 25 years is the number, but a large piece of infrastructure like that, 25, 30 years.
So if we were to go ahead and make this transfer and we do all the things and we put it together and Cal Water takes over, are we going to see a rate increase because of what you might have to do for that well?
That would have to be addressed at the time. If the well needs treatment, then and to be put into place, then that would be treatment. Then that would be go into an oncoming rate filing for infrastructure for capital investment. The difference being then that instead of being charged to 3 customers and potentially being untenable, there's a possibility of spreading it over a larger rate base. And I think Tavis touched on this also, which is something open for future consideration. The current proceeding we have right now with the CPUC includes rate-making consolidation for Oroville and Chico. That is something that could always be considered in conjunction with the city in the future if you wanted to pursue some kind of consolidation for rate-making purposes, not for operational. We'd certainly be open to those conversations to see if we could broaden that the spread of that cost.
One question, probably more for Tavis.
Sure.
If the water line was installed to provide water to the south part of the town of those 3 providers, would the water be provided from the existing wells, and those wells that would be then yours just in reserve?
Initially, yes. And then as development, which we would hope would start down there, that would probably change that. So initially, yes, we'd have water to supply those 3 customers. But once development started and there was a requirement for more source, then we'd have to be looking at treatment to put on that well.
I think the water line would be required for order to have development happen down there. My experience,
Yeah. And
It's
I
just
think, I think
infrastructure for the water would be required.
if you had that main, then you would have the treated water that could flow through that main for the existing customers. It potentially opens it up for further development. Then you're adding customers, and now you're helping to defray some additional costs down the road if you had to bring that other well back online.
Right, each development that came, our specialists would do a study on, okay, how big is the development, what's going to be the requirement, we gotta meet the fire flow, we have to meet it. So that's how all that would get triggered.
I'll defer to my council members.
Okay, but I have lots, so what is the ROI or the return on profit that the CPUC allows Cal Water?
Our rate of return right now is 7.48.
Okay.
We're currently in a cost of capital proceeding, so that could change relatively soon, but right now it's 7.48.
Is chromium-6 present in any water outside of the city of Willows? And if so, to what degree?
You mean that we operate?
No, well, do you do Orland?
We do
not.
not.
Does Orland have no chromium-6?
As far as I know, Orland does not, but I'm not 100% on that.
Yeah, I'm not certain. I don't know of any other, do we have Chrome 6 treatment in other locations? Where?
Dixon does.
Oh, Dixon, okay, yeah, that's right. So City of Dixon and Willows here for Cal Water, but there are other locations in California. I think everybody knows the movie with Julia Roberts was about Chrome 6, so it is in other places.
So if I have a city and I put $10 million in to improve the services of that city, that entire $10 million is spread over my citizens, my 6,400 ratepayers.
Mhm.
Wow. Okay.
So I think that's an important distinction too when it comes to regulated utilities, just to provide a little bit more explanation there. When you're talking about a regulated utility that has a large contiguous service area, like a power company, that tends to be one rate for all customers. Water is not regulated that way. Water is regulated, it is highly localized in the operating costs. So it is not Cal Water's position, nor do we necessarily disagree with it, but it is the philosophy of the California Public Utilities Commission when it comes to regulating water, that local customers pay the cost of service in that locale. So, for example, if we have a place, and we do in other parts of the state where they have uranium, if you have to treat for uranium in the ground, the people who live 200 miles away don't necessarily underwrite the cost of that. However, there are ways to work towards rate-making consolidation, which is what I said before, where you can actually have independent operations, but still have a rate-making region that shares the cost over a larger base of customers.
Well, it seems like that could be very burdensome on a particular group of ratepayers like Willows. Is it fair to say that no water that the ratepayers here fund at $67 or ever gets outside their realm? It never goes to the surrounding areas that are not part of the city? The areas of influence, do they pay the same?
It is fair to say that we don't produce or treat water in Willows that goes outside the city of Willows.
And so the city limits are much smaller than the footprint of the area. So the people who are not in the city still get the break, even though they're close by, but not Willows.
You're talking about those that fall in the county?
Correct.
Yes, we do serve in the county.
Okay.
But there's a defined, so there's the municipal boundary, which is the city of Willows.
Okay.
We have a defined service boundary for our Willows district, which has to go with that specific cost of service I was referencing. So Chico could include pockets outside the municipal line, but that is our Chico defined service area, and those people pay one rate. The people in Bakersfield pay the Bakersfield rate. The people in Palos Verdes pay the Palos Verdes rate. So those boundaries are set by the regulators.
The truth is the city limits of Willows City are very small relative to the population spread. So just as long as it's being shared evenly among the users and recipients of the water. The assistance programs that you have, so is it fair to say that they are billed at the rate as everybody else and that somehow their bills are paid by another method or reduced and the money that they don't pay is absorbed somewhere else? Or are the regular citizens who are paying the full bill subsidizing the assistance programs?
So the assistance program is actually drawn at a statewide rate, a portion that gets allocated to the assistance fund. So that is under the auspices of the CPUC. all ratepayers who are not in the customer assistance program pay a marginal amount into that support program, and then people who do qualify, regardless of where they are, they get that support on their monthly service bill. That also is true of the rate support fund that Shannon
So
referenced.
we're not subsidizing those programs, local people.
No, my guess would be, I mean, there are probably customers here that pay into the customer assistance program. My guess would be there's a large portion of the customers who receive that benefit as well, but I don't know that census info.
So Pat talked about the enterprise fund, and he said that the enterprise fund has resources which will pay for capital improvements like the chromium-6 treatment. And if they're paying for it through funding and grants and creative management, how is it, and you're collecting it through the ratepayers, are we double paying? How does that work out?
No, I think he was trying to, and I don't want to speak for Pat, he was trying to distinguish between the municipal enterprise fund, which is distinct from Cal Water. That is an enterprise fund that you have to maintain to operate that 3-customer system, which is distinct from Cal Water, and is currently losing money.
Operating in a deficit.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
operating in a deficit.
And were we to commute this over to Cal Water, we would no longer have an enterprise fund. We would have no need for it.
The way I heard it was is that we are offsetting the cost of investments, and if it costs $1 million and we pay $500,000 from a third party, then the real value of the spread rates is $500,000, not $1 million. Is that fair? I heard it wrong.
I mean, if it cost us $1 million, if it cost $1 million to upgrade the system and we only have the 3 customers, they would each pay $333,000 for
Yeah,
that.
but in the normal rate structure, investments like the chromium-6 thing got enterprise funding to pay that.
So actually, can you guys answer that? I mean, if we come up with any costs that come to an enterprise system are borne by the ratepayers. If something comes up if we have chromium-6 that comes up and we weren't planning for that, then we don't have a mechanism to charge them right in the immediate without going through a 218 study. So if we were to have our system operating, where have people paying for the rate that they're paying, and all of a sudden we do come up with a chromium-6 problem, and then we have this larger liability that we didn't count on, we bear the cost of that. Somehow it has to come out of general fund or however it comes out of, until we can do a 218 study that would get the money back.
Right, so the Prop 218 process requires that the people being served by the enterprise fund approve of the by 50% plus 1 of any rate increases. And if you get objections that stop you short of that 50% plus 1, then the rate increase stops, despite the fact that you might be operating in a deficit, at which point you start underwriting the cost of the enterprise with your general fund.
Which we are.
Which we're doing now.
And as he just said, Kevin just said, that we have 3 customers. So if we want to do a 218 study and it says, okay, you guys each of them needs to pay this amount of money. If 2 of them say no, then we don't get to charge them their fair share.
Well, that must be nice. Can we say no about paying the water bill? So the filtration system at $1 million and the water storage at $1 million, and there's 3 customers. Is it really require that much filtration and water storage for 3 customers? I mean, it seems exorbitant in terms of both of those pieces.
Well, I think
My understanding is that you would need the filtration because the MCL is returned. So there have been procedural challenges to that MCL. The EPA, from all indications, is not going to back off of that. And as I think we pointed out in the slide, those challenges that have stopped it already twice are not based on health or scientific medical evidence. They're strictly based on procedural issues. So that MCL is coming back, at which point you would have to install. I think the need for the tank would come along if you were to have growth, because then you would need to have enough supply to reach peak demand plus fire protection.
So I have 140,000 gallons of storage water at my business. I have 40,000 gallons of potable water. I'm a D1 certified water operator. We have some fancy name called a non-public water system. We deal with monthly and annual tests and all of that stuff. And none of it comes anywhere close to the cost that we have filtration all over the place too. But I just was curious about some of that. Is FGL going out of business?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question?
Is FGL in Chico going to close?
FGL?
That's to test all of our water. Can you test?
So the farmer, fruit growers? No. Not that it'd be, not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, we probably.
Anyway, just curious about something involved with whatnot's in the Air Force. Can we revisit the 554 at some point in time, please?
We're willing to revisit whatever needs to be revisited. I was going to say before, with regard to your own enterprise, that the non-public water system requirements are much different than what's considered a community water system, which is what you're operating now and what we would be operating.
What level of certification do we need to operate at, Pat? D1, T1, T2, D2, what?
I think it's a D1.
D1 is all it takes? I can do it. Okay, D1, that's good to know.
Right.
You won't be treating then. 'Cause
I believe the only thing that's treated out of the wells at this point in time is chlorination.
You would also need a treatment because of the filtration that you set up on the well.
Okay, very
Which
good.
again, would probably be a T1, but.
We look at 554 is a number we'd like to talk about if we may. And I know it's been talked about and massaged and it exists on paper, but if we could revisit that in terms of our partnership going forward. Thank you. That's me.
Sir, I think you partially addressed it, but I know that the city of Dixon, part of their community is served by Cal Water and part of it is a public municipality. Do they, I think you had just said a moment ago that they have to comply with a different set of regulations. Is that what you said?
They, then he does it in his business enterprise because they're running a community water system contiguous with ours, or adjacent to ours, I should say, not contiguous, although I do think we have a tie-in. So that presents some different challenges, and I believe that they've had some issues with the Prop 218 process and generating the revenue they need for their enterprise there as well.
Okay, so have they considered turning over their water system to Cal Water? Do you know?
Can we talk about that? Not in
Oh, okay.
the
I'm just curious because
I'm more than willing to discuss some of those issues. I just don't know that it's appropriate for me to talk about it on the record in this way.
okay. Well, I was just curious. I actually went down to the hearing down in Sacramento when they was proposing this, the chromium-6 regulations. A council member from here, myself, just as a private party, and then the mayor of Dixon, Tom Board, I believe, spoke in opposition of this. And correct me if I'm wrong, the federal level is 100 parts per billion for chromium-6. And California was 50 parts per billion.
Yeah, and I think the 100 might be, and I'm going to ask Megan to speak to this if you can, but that might be it's not an MCL yet, it's that precursor that's called a...
It's for total chromium.
It's for total chromium, not chrom 6. Okay.
Yeah, because, I mean, not that we can argue that, it's just that there was mention about, health and safety.
Yeah.
And, I was always concerned, it's like, okay, people outside of California, I guess their health isn't as important as people in California.
Right, that some of those decisions are outside of our
I agree.
purview when those decisions get made. But those are one of the ways these get challenged in many ways. And it happened in the chrom 6 first instance, which is the economic feasibility, challenging the economic feasibility, which is, to use some hypothetical numbers, is it economically feasible to increase the cost by 100% if you're only getting a health improvement of 0.1%. And that's where those kinds of challenges, nobody's challenging whether or not chrom 6 is a carcinogen or adverse health effects. It comes down to that economic feasibility element of the process, and that's where it got challenged.
Well, I know that was the three speakers that spoke in opposition was, the cost.
Yeah.
And so, I was just curious on that matter.
Yeah.
One of the things that was mentioned in the news clip was, and forgive me, but they said that sell, and we're doing just the opposite. We're spending our money to give,
If I could write the script for the reporter, I would write the script for the reporter. I'll lie to you, although I was a reporter in a former lifetime. So.
Yeah, and that's one of the tough things for us is to explain to our constituents that, we're spending, $500 and some odd $1,000 to extend the line and then give up 2 wells so that we can get charged a higher rate. That's one of my difficulties.
That's why we want to revisit it.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and obviously that's, the decision that the council has to make Marty was saying, it's not an action item tonight, it's for,
Correct.
to kind of sunshine some of these issues. I think, from my perspective, I would look at the long-term benefit of having an experienced and qualified operator running that system and what that will do to the potential economic growth in that area, if you can open that up for expansion, as opposed to incurring more cost and more liability in the hopes that that economic expansion happens. If it were not to materialize, or if it were to materialize on a very slow and long horizon, you're not bearing the cost of that long horizon for that economic development to occur.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have at this moment, sir.
Casey?
I think the answer, it's tough, like Jeff said, it's very tough to justify to anybody to give away assets to pay for it. And then I didn't know, so you're gonna build a storage tank and all that stuff, and the ratepayers are gonna pay it. So you're really paying twice to give these things away, right?
So on the tank, Casey, so the developers would end up paying for that tank. We would not ask the ratepayers of Willows to do that.
Okay.
When a developer came in, we have a process for that, and it would require, basically kind of how it works is the first developer that comes in gets the big whammy. As other developers come in, there's usually a fee set up to reimburse that first developer as other ones come in.
Okay.
Cover the cost of it.
Yeah. And I know from experience too, that not necessarily with tanks, but in other situations where developers paid for a main extension, and then people have come in after the fact, there can be some grousing up front, but I've had developers tell me 10 and 20 years down the road that it was the best thing they ever did, because they're getting paid down the road, consistently being reimbursed.
You all know how PG&E does that, right? They give you the choice of a discount up front or choice of revenue sharing as it's added on to. You might consider that, I don't know.
Yeah, so again, it's tough, and then you hear I don't trust the CPUC as far as I can throw them. I probably couldn't throw them very far. So, it's very, I have a hard time with these quasi-regulated public-private things. I have a super hard time with that. Long-term, I'd like to see more things municipal. I think that's important for the growth and sustainability of these small rural towns. I know it's a big upfront cost, but do we pay the upfront cost in bonds, or do we pay it to someone else? And then, it's not a sunk cost, I don't think, if you're paying your own people to go out and do it. It stays in your community, which you guys do employ people who live here, so that's not the biggest difference as in the, other places. But it's just stuff to think about. But thank you guys, I appreciate it.
Gary?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, thank you, gentlemen, and to the entire Cal Water team for the presentation tonight, and also Pat for your presentation as well. And, I've said it before, I'll say it again, Cal Water, you're good at what you do. You're outstanding at what you do, the service you provide delivering water. You're top notch. And you've been a great, company to partner with over all these years. So, yeah, thank you for everything that you do. Both you gentlemen touched on the temporary stay on the chromium-6 levels, issued obviously by the Department of Public Health. We've talked about this, just so everybody here understands. Could you go into that a little more deeper on the temporary stay? So initially 3 wells, and then eventually a 4th of your 7 wells were outfitted with the chromium-6 filtration, only because of the new state requirements. Councilmember Williams mentioned the public hearing. I was also there, I did not speak. I was in my headquarters building. That's one reason I didn't speak that day, but I did attend the important session of that hearing, and it was very clear where that was going to go. Okay, even though we fall within the safe MCL criteria under the federal regulations. Could you just take a couple of minutes, take a little bit deeper dive and explain that temporary stay, because that's my concern. It's only a temporary stay.
Correct. So my understanding of it, and I'll let Tavis and Megan chime in if I misspeak, is again, that initial challenge had to do with the economic feasibility, the level versus the cost of reaching that level. We had already begun the process of addressing it, much like further down south in the Central Valley where I live. A similar thing unfolded with 123 TCP, where they really only gave about 6 months to meet the MCL. So we were moving like gangbusters to address it. When the stay initial came along, we figured that, and it was not an easy decision because that's a risk we're taking, because if the MCL never gets set, then we're investing money that we cannot recoup. But health and safety is our #1 concern with serving our customers. We decided to continue with the treatment and take that risk. I think we talked about this in the 2018 rate case, and I believe I had that conversation with you at the time too. That cost, we got it partially defrayed via grants. And then we're also looking at one point, we're looking at a fairly significant surcharge up here that was deeply concerning. And then we figured out a way with input from the public advocates and the CPUC to offset that with the rate support fund. So although there has been a capital hit in Willows, we've done everything really that we could and had to think relatively creatively to keep that to mitigate that cost effect. We've gone through the stay, it's come back around again with another suggested MCL, which is at the same level it was previously, and again, all indication is that that will be the level once they clear all these kind of procedural hurdles.
Yeah, that's a shocker, isn't it? No surprise there. No, thank you for going into that level.
Absolutely. I think that it was going to be a $16 surcharge, so we had to get really creative to get that taken away. And I can remember being up here talking about it on a very challenging night.
Yes, you were. Yeah, thank God that at least that was effective. And you also touched on it. The only reason we're even dealing with Chromium 6 is just because of our location. You know, the community of Chrome on County Road 306 between Elk Creek and Newville had a chrome line. It's leached into our water supply.
Yeah.
That's why Orland doesn't have the issue. Well, here we are, it found us.
And it's just the way the plume moves.
That's right.
And it's not something that Cal Water contributed to, nor is it something that the people of Willows contributed to, but it does need to be addressed.
Exactly. And, your company moved forward and put the filtration in because, I mean, you're up against a wall and had to. And even though there is a temporary stay, it'll come back. And that's what concerns me about, we have this small water enterprise with 3 customers. And eventually, if we don't move forward with this plan, eventually we will be putting filtration on that well because it's coming back.
And Pat mentioned, when Chrome 6 gets settled, possibly even before it gets settled, depending on how long it drags out, that the overall trend is not less water quality regulation. The overall trend, if you look back through history, is more, and that can, depending on how you see things, that could be viewed as a good thing or a bad thing, but it is a reality. And when Chrome 6 gets settled, the next substance you're already reading about in the national media is called PFAS. That's already under draft MCL with the federal EPA, and the really challenging horizon down the road, I'm sure Megan's reading about it all the time, is microplastics. So there are always new constituents and substances that are being kind of identified by the public health professionals, and then that gets passed down to us at the boots on the ground level to try and address.
Yeah, and that's the frightening thing about us being in the water business with the small water enterprise, because we're on the hook for all this now, and it's not going to get any better. It's only going to get more expensive and more complicated.
Yeah, and another thing to point out on the Chrome 6 treatment, just as far as, and of course, hindsight is 20/20 on these things, and we made that decision because we honestly believed it was the right thing to do to move forward. But building that treatment now, in the current inflationary environment, would potentially be much more expensive than when we built it.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's interesting. You went into just enough information on the rates and on the, our rates were similar to Chico and Hamilton City, which are the same. But before Chromium 6, so it's roughly a 45% increase for the treatment, just for the Chromium 6, and here we are with these water bills. So, and thank you for laying that out. In October, the previous council approved it, as we've touched on before, roughly $550,000 in ARPA funds to extend roughly half-mile So our water main currently goes to the Basin Street development, Harvest Drive, to get the rest of the way down to the city limits, County Road 57 to Wilbur Ellis, to those two wells, roughly half a mile at approximately $550,000. So, and Cal Water was going to supply and pay for the engineering and design work. And if I remember right, it was in the neighborhood of $37,000 to $39,000. And has that been done?
I think we did.
It
We
has.
did the plans, yeah.
It's 100% done. The project is actually ready to go to bid.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I was going to that was you, John. Okay. I was
Well,
trying-
we work cooperatively. The city,
Sure.
the city provided Cal Water with the necessary topo to do the design, and then Cal Water did the design. They gave it back to us, and we put it in the format to put it out to bid. Or, well, we have it in that format ready to go if and when the council were to approve of it. After your discussions, I have something else that I can throw out as a possibility for the council to consider.
Okay. Yeah, very good. And you know, and $550,000 approximately for that half mile water main. That's a 12-inch water main, correct? 12-inch water main, a half a mile, 4 feet in the ground, roughly, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, that's a lot of soil to move. It's a lot of main to put in. But was it 37 to 39,000, John? Was that
Pardon me?
37 to 39,000 for the engineering design? Is that
I
pretty
think
close?
I think it was around $40,000 worth of credit that Cal Water put into it.
Okay, very good. But you know, just with the regulations and with the future treatment that's going to be necessary for that system, if we maintain it, it's you know, I've said this for years. It's nothing new. We from a financial perspective, we just need to get out of the water business and defer this to the water professionals and extend that main down. And I'm in total agreement that in October, the council approved that plan unanimously. And it's just something that we need to do to save us potentially millions of dollars down the road. So anyway, that's all I had. So thank you.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask one question that I was asked by my constituent, one in particular, and this is a little bit unrelated, but it is this. So between the City of Willows water plant program system and the chromium-6 treatment that we benefit from, there's a multitude of wells going west on various residential and other forms of land, including John's Manville. What is their relationship to chromium-6? And how does that all fit into this, we want the water to be healthy, but you guys are not in the city, good luck?
Well, we don't have the jurisdiction to address domestic or commercial wells that are not in our system. And domestic wells or commercial wells that are in our system have to either, they need what's called a backflow prevention device to make sure that there is no back siphonage, which could draw untreated water into the system. So any of those wells that are adjacent to us are either isolated from the system or if they are within the system, and I don't know the details, Tavis should have a backflow prevention device on them to do that back
I was
siphonage.
just curious if I had a well that I held on Route 305 over there, and I'm pumping it out of the ground straight into the house.
Unfortunately, there's not a lot we can do outside our jurisdiction, but if the line was extended down there,
Yeah, I understand.
it'd be,
And I don't see any data on chromium-6 in the tests we do. It just isn't on the form. It's, you know what it is, coliform and all that normal stuff.
Right, yeah, and they should be doing bacteries now. It's a sad thing that a lot of people who have domestic wells are not doing bacterial testing at all. Sometimes they'll do nitrate testing, but they're not.
nitrates is probably.
Yeah, but more people on domestic wells should actually do some more rigorous testing on some of those things, including
I
bacteria.
just say that 99% of domestic wells don't do any testing.
At all.
You know.
I used to be on a domestic well down in Tulare County, and then we got the well tested, and then we sold the house and moved into Cal Water territory.
Well, I had my well tested at the ranch, and it was actually, I mean, we've always had, it's great tasting water. It's a 260-foot well, and it came out perfectly clean.
Yeah.
Came out fantastic. I was surprised with, anyway, but it was good news.
So do we have anybody in the public that would like to ask questions? Hearing none, all I can say is thank you to all of the Cal Water fine folk that came up and made this presentation and brought it to us. Thank you. look better as a bunny. But thank you for coming.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Oh, we had one more thing from John.
Just, something dawned on me as we were speaking, and I know the council is very concerned about spending the money, fronting the money to get this line extended. And one thing occurred to me that we would have to work with the city attorney's office, but there's a procedure called an area of benefit. And if you enact and form this area of benefit, what it allows the city to do is actually, you're gonna have to forgive me because it's not actually a lien, but in essence what it is on the undeveloped properties that are adjacent to South Tehama that would eventually tie into this. It places a burden on those properties that would say, if you develop, your fair share of repaying this is X amount. So in essence, it's something that wouldn't be forced on anybody if they were to remain as a farmer. But if they were to develop and tie into that line, it would mandate that they pay back their fair share of that line. It's similar to what was mentioned before, as far as for instance, if a developer were to front money and get a whole bunch of improvements installed, and then eventually as other developments occurred, money would be collected to pay that back. It's a very, very similar situation, and I've actually done areas of benefits in other cities for this exact same reason, that it can eventually get the city repaid by any development that occurs down there. So in essence, what it does is, the city would have to front the money, and we would have to wait for development, but as development occurred, the city would get paid back for what.
Make it a lot more palatable.
Yeah, much like the deferred improvement agreement.
Pardon?
Much like the deferred improvement agreement.
It is, same concept, same exact concept. There's, a matter of fact, I was looking on my phone as we were sitting here because I had that epiphany. It's like, well, I didn't mention this before, but City of Santa Cruz has an ordinance where it's an ordinance allowing them to put into effect area benefits. So it would, in essence, be the council, again, making sure that this is all feasible and legally acceptable through the city attorney's office, but you'd adopt an ordinance. That ordinance would go into effect, then you'd form an area of benefit around whoever would be tying into this that currently has undeveloped properties. And then those properties would eventually, if they ever develop, have to pay back the city for tying into that water main.
And the problem with that is then it's just going to increase the cost, or the chances of anybody wanting to develop out there is increased cost.
Yes and no, because most of the time a developer would understand that there's cost to bring their project to fruition.
And spread it
The
out.
question is how deep it would be, but it's certainly worth directing our city attorney to review the benefits of an area of benefit.
Because it would be, in essence, instead of fronting 100% of the ARPA money and saying we're never going to see that again, we'd front it. But then we'd have hopes that, construction of that line wouldn't actually promote some development down there, and then as that occurred, we would get repaid.
We could also limit the amount that they'd have to reimburse.
Right.
So if we said
Adjusted.
50% of that cost would come back for connection, we could maybe massage to encourage growth that way too, by limiting that amount.
That would be my concern, is
Would be my
developer looking at it and saying, well,
So right now, if somebody wanted to build on that south corner, they're looking at $500,000 to get the water down there.
Yeah. That's what, it spreads the cost out instead of, it's a partnership, you're here, you're helping, you gotta front some costs, but you don't have to front all the costs, because we're gonna help out with that.
Thank you, John, that's
Yeah, thanks, John. Like I said, at some point, I know we gotta pay for it, but we didn't put the chrome in the water, we didn't put the microplastics in the water, we keep having to pay for everything, so that's the frustrating part of everything. It's not Cal Water's fault, it's not anybody's fault, but, at some point, that's why I'm so bold, I get hard-headed on these municipality things, because at some point, you gotta be able to control your destiny a little bit, right? If you gotta pay for it, you gotta pay for it, and that's more, it's easier digestible when you're gonna own the thing, and you're gonna pay for it yourself than giving it away, but whatever. my 2 cents.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I didn't want to step on you, I'm sorry. Mr. Mayor, just one comment. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Braden from Assemblyman James
Thank you,
Gallagher.
I was going to introduce him, so thank you.
Braden from Assemblyman James Gallagher's office. Thank you for being here tonight, and I thanked him in person before, but thank you very much for his sponsorship of AB 50, which has definitely helped us out with this current potential project that we've talked about tonight on the Burton Soil Water Enterprise Fund, and it does sunset in January 24. So that's a 21st or January 31st?
January 1st.
Yeah, so the clock's ticking.
So really, December 31st of this year is what you want to shoot for.
So anyway, thank you, Braden. Any questions for Braden?
Can you help us with our pool?
Okay, if there's no comments from the public, we will be adjourning to closed session. We'll take public comment about the closed session. The closed session is for us to, as a council, to get to know our new city attorney, for the attorney to hear from the council. So does anybody have any comments that they'd like to make before we adjourn to closed session?
Mr. Mayor, if you might, I just want to thank everybody from Cal Water for showing up.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
You know, we're pleased with the service. Like I said, we're just the concerns that we have of spending that. So thank you very much.
We're going to help.
Thank you.
Yes.
Meeting adjourned.